Thank you. Oh, good. So, as I was thinking about our gathering today, and I was thinking about what's really brought us here. You know, what is... We all come from very different backgrounds, different locations, different lives, and yet we find ourselves here. Something brought us here, something drew us here. And I was thinking, what is the common element that really we all share? And it occurs to me that, at least for myself, and I think this may be true for all of us, there is this desire for wholeness. And we could give this a lot of different terms. We could call it consciousness, we could call it awakening, we could call it enlightenment. But there's something that brought us to this path, brought us to a teacher like Deepak, brought us to associations with others like ourselves. So there is that something. And I wanted just to ask you to take a moment and just reflect for a minute and ask yourself, what is that something that brought us to this, all of this, and to this moment together? And I'd like you to come up with a word, and maybe you can just close your eyes for a minute and just bring your attention inside. And it may be something in the direction of what we call enlightenment, but I'd like you to think of maybe another word or some other pointer. What is it that brought us here? So maybe you can, if you have something, you can just let me know. Yes. Peace. Peace. Wanting peace. Drawing us toward peace. Remembering. Expansion. Good.
Hunger.
Sorry?
Hunger.
Hunger? For something more? Understanding. Okay.
Foundation.
Sorry?
Foundation.
Foundation. Belonging? Longing. A longing for what? Something. Longing for something.
For not something, for the truth.
The truth. Oh, okay. Whatness. Oneness. Yeah, a sense that may exist for us. Oneness. Universality. Mm-hmm. So, being connected to universality. Equanimity. What is that? What's the next step from equanimity? What does that bring us if we have equanimity? Peace. Balance, unity, harmony, love, understanding, compassion, connection. Sorry? Freedom, that's a good one. So this was a bit of a trick question in a way, because the truth is, when we the important thing is not the word itself that we come up with, of course. It's what does this point to? What is that something? We can give it a lot of words, but as we begin to kind of inquire into what is that longing, what is that desire for something more? And this is part of what I wanted to talk about this morning, was this process of self-inquiry. And holistic self-inquiry is really a major part of the retreat experience. And certainly it's something that we'll be doing, all of us that'll be here this week, we'll have a lot more opportunity for this. And I'm going to kind of talk about some of the various approaches to this morning. But it's also a useful tool in our everyday lives. In fact, hopefully it will become more of a useful tool for us in our everyday lives. Because the truth is, what we're all speaking about just now, those qualities, that something more, it doesn't exist in the future. It's not something separate from us. It's who and what we are in this moment. It is already present. Everything that you said, it's already available right now. The truth is we forget, right? Someone said remembrance, so that may be one way to approach it, but we are already that. We are already this consciousness. We can't not be this consciousness. And yet we become identified with different experiences. And so the process of holistic self-inquiry is about discriminating and beginning to see what the experience is, but also who and what is having the experience. And gradually sort of dissolving the identification that keeps us in this illusion of separateness, this illusion of somehow I'm not whole, I'm not connected, I'm not free, I'm not awake, I'm not enlightened, you know? So in the Vedic tradition, you know, we have many tools. The science of yoga, which is truly the science of transformation, and as we know, there's so many tools available to us through the yoga tradition. And, oh dear. So we can look at the four principal paths of yoga, which we know are karma yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga, and raja yoga. Some people would say there's 6 principal paths, but these are the main ones because Raja Yoga incorporates all of the limbs of yoga. But of these 4 principal paths of yoga, it's Jnana Yoga that we're going to talk about this morning, which is the yoga of knowledge. Jnana Yoga, the yoga of knowledge, the mind inquires into its own nature in order to transcend its identification with thoughts and ego and ultimately itself. So that's something to ponder, that the mind could actually transcend itself. And jnana means self-knowledge. The word jnana, sometimes we talk about jnana vichara or atma vichara. Vichara means inquiry or deliberation, vichara. Maybe some of you have encountered that Sanskrit term before. So atma is the soul or the self. So jnana yoga is self-inquiry, observation or witnessing of ultimately the soul itself. This is a beautiful quote from Ramana Maharshi. I'm sure many of you know Ramana Maharshi, great Indian saint, Advaita Vedanta tradition. Whoop, what happened? That's something I don't hear Renee say very often. I don't know. It'll come back, okay. You know, that's probably an obvious nimitta or omen, because none of this stuff I'm going to say really matters. It's just pure being, right? Slipping into the silence of being. Okay, so this is a quote from Ramana. He says, "Your true nature is that of infinite spirit. The feeling of limitation is the work of the mind." I think we can all grasp that. When the mind unceasingly investigates its own nature, it transpires that there is not such a thing as mind. That's a beautiful pointer, because it's the cessation of the thoughts and identification that allows for the realization of oneness, being, all the things that we were just talking about. This is the direct path for all. What's going on? And this is another lovely quote. It just seemed to fit this discussion this morning. The one who asks questions doesn't lose his way, his or her way. African proverb. So this idea of inquiring, of questioning, so we can all acknowledge that there are sort of two aspects to who we are. We could say one is the unconditioned self, and the other is the conditioned self, or what we might call the unborn nature and the born nature. Our born nature was given to us at birth. You know, we acquired certain qualities. We acquired a physical body. We acquired a family, an environment. We were given a name. We were imprinted with various impressions from our early lives that we have cultivated and developed into our personalities. The ego is a kind of a collection, you might say. I think of it as being our self-protection mechanisms. You know, we all have developed these qualities, personality qualities, in order to feel safe in the world and to navigate our lives and to hope to get nourishment. As living organisms, you know, we're seeking nourishment all the time. It's very fundamental to every living thing. So we're looking for, in some ways, a sense of security and safety. And yet, there's also the unborn nature, the unconditioned self, the aspect of ourselves that was already present when we were born. It was the already always so, and in fact is always so in every moment. And yet, I think we'll all acknowledge that much of the time we default to this identification with a so-called me, a thought of ourselves as being a certain way, as looking a certain way, or having a certain kind of voice, or having certain relationships in our lives, and certain roles that we play in life, and we all play many roles. And so we tend to identify with a physical body. We get up every morning, we look in the mirror, it looks kind of like it did yesterday. So we think, yeah, this must be me. And yet, as Deepak points out, we make a completely new one about every 2 years. It's sort of like taking off an article of clothing and putting on a new one. I mean, how could this really be who we are, this body? Same with the personality, kind of the song and dance that we have cultivated in order to get along in the world. It changes depending on who we're with and what we're doing. Would you agree? So that can't really be who we are. And the roles we play are changing. Some days we're a friend, some days we're a parent, some days we're a role in a job, some days we're a friend, some days we're many things. So the roles can't really be who we are, right? And the relationships are changing as well. So if all these things are changing and can't really be who we are, who are we is the important question. In self-inquiry does not seek to grasp onto any concept of ourselves. I think this is something that kind of confused me a bit in the beginning when I was beginning to explore this whole process of self-inquiry. Because it's the nature of the mind to want to grasp onto something, wants that security of something to hold on to. So that's often the way we approach this process. And yet, truly, the process of self-inquiry is more observing the manifestations as they arise and as they change, which they always will. And eventually the whole thing disappears, right? You know? So everything has a beginning, middle, and an ending. But the process of self-inquiry is more about witnessing the manifestations. And as we witness, we begin to develop a felt sense of that which is witnessing, of that which is observing, whatever is arising. And so, as Ramana Maharshi said, self-inquiry is designed ultimately to eliminate the questioner. And there's just the oneness, there's just the being, there's just the I am. And yet, we're not trying to do this, because, of course, that just becomes yet another ego effort. So it's a relaxed process, this process of self-inquiry. And that's really why, retreat is such a great opportunity to really deepen this exploration of self-inquiry, because we eliminate a lot of the distractions that we're accustomed to gravitating toward. Certainly all of our gizmos, which have become, part of our, physical bodies. Truly, we're mutating. We're becoming cyborgs with all these gizmos. And so that's why, it's great to take a fast from all of our devices when we come to retreat and suddenly see what happens. Suddenly see the craving. I got to check my email. I have to know who the Instagram or whatever, all the ways we feel that we stay connected. And of course, there's a lot of positives about these devices, and yet we have to be careful that we don't lose ourselves, that we don't forget who we are. And that's why we're all here. So, in the retreat experience, we have the opportunity to begin to observe some of our tendencies to default to one thing or another. And then, over a period of retreat, we begin to see a little more subtle arising. Some of the anxiety of not talking to other people, of feeling like somehow I'm alone, which can bring up very primal issues for us, very, very old. I hesitate to use the word, but I'm going to use it anyway. Old woundings that haven't really been fully resolved, in our lives. We've pushed them away. We've tucked them away. We've created all these defenses against feeling them. So that's another reason why retreat can be such a rich experience of diving into these deeper layers of our own, our own not self, our own not self. So Deepak has introduced this process of self-inquiry through the 4 soul questions. We've become pretty familiar with these by now. Who am I? What do I want? What is my Dharma? And what am I grateful for? And I've been reflecting on these 4 soul questions, and there's a subject that some of you have heard me talk about before. It's a subject I really like to present about because it's become an important part of my own life, I have to say, in my own practice, my own working with people in my counseling practice. Even in the Vedic chart, this is an evident aspect of what we do. And it's referred to as the Purusharthas. How many people have heard this word before, have heard me talk about this subject before, the Purusharthas? So some of you. So I'll do a little quick run through the Purusharthas, but I want to encourage you to investigate these. The Purusharthas are very much a core teaching in the Vedic tradition. They're very old in their references in the Vedas, in the Upanishads, and the Mahabharata, and the Ramayana, and the Bhagavad Gita. The Purusharthas are truly an essential aspect of our humanness. It refers to what really motivates us in any moment. What is our desire? Because the truth is, if we didn't have desire, we wouldn't do anything. We wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. In fact, we probably wouldn't have a bed because we wouldn't exist. There wouldn't have been a mom and dad to have desire to give birth to us. There wouldn't be anything without desire, if you think about this. Desire, we could say, makes the world go round. So what motivates us in life? And the Vedic teaching of the Purusharthas, which are referred to as the 4 aims of life, the 4 aims of life. And the teaching is that, in any moment of our lives, one or another of these 4 aims, these Purusharthas, is going to be compelling us. And the truth is, all 4 are, in fact, alive in us all the time. And yet, for each of us, there will be one or another that may be prominent at any given time. And just to review these, the 4 Purusharthas are Dharma, something called Artha, which I'll explain a little more. Artha. Kama, K-A-M-A, as opposed to karma, Kama, and Moksha. We know the term Moksha, liberation, self-realization. So Dharma refers to our moral, we could say our moral values. Dharma is that which sustains everything in the universe. Everything has a connection. Everything has Dharma in its relationship to the whole. Everything in existence. So we refer to this as Sanatana Dharma, the universal Dharma. Everything in nature has its Dharma. Everything in the celestial realm has its Dharma. Its purpose, we could say, is to use one word. And there's also the personal Dharma. We call it Swadharma, which has to do with the way we seek to align harmoniously with our own nature and ultimately with natural law. So the way we seek to align harmoniously with our own nature and with natural law. Dharma often reflects an expression of our talents, gifts, and abilities, and also gives the desire for us to share those in some way. It evokes this generosity of spirit. So when we're really feeling like we're in our right work, we're energized, we're excited, we want to share that excitement with others. And doing what it aligns with something we really love. We would love to do, whether we got paid for it or not, whether other people cared what we did or not. It's something we know inherently that we love, that brings a sense of fulfillment and joy, that arises out of us spontaneously. We don't need something outside of us. So it's sort of in alignment with what we could call self-referral consciousness as opposed to object referral consciousness. Sense of expansion and fullness. And when we're in our Dharma, when we're feeling in alignment with our own nature, we feel the support of nature because we're not separate. It's the same nature. And so there is the dissolution or the dissolving of this illusory sense of separateness. We feel held. We feel connected. We feel that we're in the flow, to use just some expressions. And we feel that we've found our purpose, our place within the whole. We feel that we're comfortable. We're where we should be. We don't need to hurry up and get to something in the future, or we're not, remembering something in the past. We're just glad to be where we are. So presence. So some of the inquiries around Dharma, if we're in the process of, in any moment, inquiring which of these four aims of life is lively for us right now. One question might be, well, certainly, what is my Dharma? Which is, of course, the soul question that Deepak has given us to use as part of our practice. What is my Dharma? Or how can I help? How may I serve? When we feel that connection to our purpose, we find ourselves just opening ourselves to the environment and saying, what's needed out here? What needs would I have to give? How can I connect? And how may I best contribute to the welfare of the whole? So again, there's this sense of connectedness to something bigger than just the me, this idea of a me. And that gives rise to excitement, to energy, to the joy and the sense of fullness that we talked about. So it's an important inquiry in any moment if we find ourselves contracted, thinking too much about, what's in it for me? What do I need? Am I going to get enough? Am I going to be supported? When we begin to shift our attention to, with whatever talents, gifts, and abilities I have, how can I help? How can I contribute? How may I serve? Artha, the second of the Purusharthas, has to do with our economic values. So it has to do with prosperity and maintenance. Artha is all of the stuff that we accumulate. It's the means that I may need, ideally, to support my Dharma, to support my purpose in life. But it can also be, basic resources. Wealth, we say, money, material necessities. All the stuff of our lives, our clothing, our houses, our vehicles, the food we eat, the tools, all the things that we need to sort of support our physical existence, but also ideally to support our purpose in some way. Even the body itself is part of Artha. And health, everything that supports our physical health, so that we can sort of continue. As living organisms, we're programmed to want to continue, to survive. So basic survival needs are associated with Artha. So our inquiries around Artha are, what do I actually need that is appropriate to support my Dharma? What does wealth actually mean besides money? Is another good inquiry around Artha. What does wealth actually mean? How much do I need? Do I have too little? Do I have too much? In order to really support Dharma. And this is an important one. Am I pursuing Artha? Am I pursuing the acquisition of resources out of proportion to Dharma? That's why Dharma in the Purusharthas is always referred to as the first of the four aims of life. Because when we find our place, our purpose, it's like having a rudder in life. And we find fulfillment in that rather than seeking for things outside of ourselves. So the acquisition of the means, the Artha, doesn't become quite as compelling in an unhealthy way or an unbalanced way. We seek to acquire the means that is appropriate for us in our lives. Now, obviously, we see all the time people that maybe don't have some alignment with a sense of Dharma that are seeking more and more and more stuff, right? I mean, we've probably all had some moments like that ourselves. We feel like, I've got to have more stuff in order to feel whole and complete, in order to fill up that sense of emptiness that I feel. And this can, lead us into all kinds of imbalances in our choices in life. Greed and avarice, and it just gets worse from there. Another important inquiry with respect to Artha, as Deepak has given us, is what am I grateful for? Because the tendency to default to a sense of lack, what do I think I don't have? What do I need? What am I desperately seeking? It just creates more of a sense of lack. Would you agree? We talk about the law of attraction. What we put our attention on becomes enlivened, becomes more enlivened in our awareness. So if we put our attention on what we lack, we just create more of a sense of lack. And there's never enough. But when we begin to put our attention on what we actually have to be grateful for, or inquire, what am I grateful for? Bit by bit, we begin to start to see that what we come up with is endless. There's so much that we have to be grateful for. Just beginning with our own physical bodies and health and everything, hopefully everything works, for the most part. The breath that we breathe, every moment that we take for granted, Certainly consciousness itself, which is like the air we breathe, which is always available to us. And everything else. So the more we start putting our attention, as we know, on what we have to be grateful for, the more likely we are to attract more of the same and to align with the abundance of nature. Because all we have to do is look at nature, and we see that nature is constantly giving. There's abundance everywhere, and there's affluence everywhere in nature. And we are part of that if we allow ourselves to align with it. And then we don't have to have anxiety about what we lack. It's always there. It's an important practice. So what am I grateful for? Yes, ma'am.
So, do you think, sort of like the instant gratification that people get now through the internet and all those other kinds of things, do you think that can lend itself to an out of balance Artha?
What would you say?
Well, yes, I would say yes.
Okay.
So walking away then from that or taking breaks from that can actually help.
Exactly. That's what we're doing here. The question was, do you think all the distractions take us away? I'm not sure I'm going to be able to say the question exactly. But yes, I would say it's good to take a break. I think you know the answer.
Oh,
Yeah. In fact, usually, when we have questions, if we get still and quiet, we're going to know the answer. And I think that's one of the things we encourage people in the retreat, is because, the mind is so looking for things to grasp onto. It's just our kind of habitual existence to just stop in the moment. And because usually the answer to the question is there in the question. So I think you know the answer. I think we know the answer to that. So kama often is as the third of the four aims of life. Kama has a lot to do with desire and enjoyment. Once we've sort of established our survival needs in the Artha section, we've got kind of our stuff. We need, we're okay. Got a roof, got food, all that stuff. We start to want to expand our pursuit of pleasure, and we seek a more expanded sphere of enjoyment and look to share those enjoyable experiences with others. So love, attraction, beauty, sensuality, sexuality, enjoyment on every level, we often seek other people to share those experiences with. So kama has a lot to do with our relationships. Now, kama as desire can also have a shadow side. Ideally, if we're seeking relationships that are in alignment with our Dharma, with our purpose, we're going to attract appropriate persons, appropriate associations that are going to support our Dharma, that are going to support our purpose, and that we can feel we are contributing to. So there's a balance there. But if we don't have, if we're seeking pleasure out of balance with our relationships, it's sort of like with the Artha. It becomes more and more distorted and can ultimately turn into addiction. And because there's never enough pleasure to fill us up. So if we're aligned with Dharma, as I said, we're going to already feel the fulfillment. We're not going to be lacking. We're not going to be craving. And we're more likely to attract appropriate associations, appropriate relationships. So some of the inquiries around kama are, what brings delight and enjoyment to me, and what others that I may influence? This aligns with the question, what do I want? What do I want? Which pleasures enhance consciousness and which deplete the soul? So all of us at times are inclined to seek pleasure. This is an important part of what motivates us in life, and avoiding pain. So it's important that we inquire, in what way am I pursuing pleasure in my life? And am I forgetting my purpose in the pursuit of pleasure? Does that make sense, everybody? I mean, it's a pretty simple concept. Am I tipping over into the realm of addiction and compulsion, where I feel like I've got to have this thing or I'm not going to be happy? Or am I already happy because I know who I am, I know my place within the whole? And which pleasures lead me toward or away from Dharma? This is a very important inquiry. So as I said at the beginning, in any moment of our lives, one or another of these four inquiries is going to be sort of prominent in our awareness. So by just remembering to stop and ask, where is my attention now? Because always one of these four aims of life is going to be operating, and that's why they're such a core principle in the Vedic tradition, and they're found in all of the great books of the Veda. Because all four are essential to a balanced life, to a good life, we could say. We have to have all four of these operating, and we're always looking to try have a balanced relationship with all four of these aims of life. So the fourth of the four aims of life is moksha. We could say our spiritual values. Moksha is the context of everything, of the content of our experience, we could say. But of course, as we said at the beginning, a lot of times we become so identified with the content of our experience, with the body, with the personality, the roles we're playing, the relationships, with our experience, that we forget who and what is having the experience, the context, which is our true nature. So moksha, as our spiritual values, often is referred to as the pinnacle of the Purusharthas, because it truly is what we're all after, and what is already always so. And so having a spiritual life allows us to remember this, even in the midst of all of our other activities of life. Liberation through self-realization, freedom from attachment to suffering, fear, and limitation. Can everybody see this okay? I know some of you are way at the back. You can see it? Good. I figured you wouldn't be sitting back there if you couldn't see. So it's the attachment, to suffering, fear, and limitation that keeps us in this illusion of separateness. So relinquishing our attachment. Freedom to express our full creativity, and the dissolution of delusion and boundaries. So the story of me begins to fall away. This preoccupation with this circular pattern of thinking, that we keep coming back to this sort of false identity of a me, which then gives rise to certain emotional patterns and ultimately certain behavioral patterns, right? So that's why it's really important to have a practice of inquiry so that we can really see what is motivating us. What is the thought? What is the thought of the me? What is the me, anyway? This is really what this process of holistic self-inquiry is about. It's following the me back to the source where the me is seen to be not real. The source, which is, our essential nature as consciousness. I keep turning this thing off and it keeps coming on. Gosh, sorry. These gizmos are getting smarter and smarter. They're not letting you turn them off. Pretty soon we're just going to be following these things around. Tell me what to do. So the story of me begins to gradually dissolve. And part of this experience of moksha is just the acceptance of what is. It's allowing everything to be as it is. It's not continuing to assert our separateness, our need to make things other than they are. So it's relaxing that self-effort that has become like, it's like an allergy. The ego, I think of it as like an allergy. It sort of developed in order to kind of protect us in some way, and yet it kind of took over. And so we have to find a way to kind of give up the allergy in a way. Letting go of all identification with a separate sense of self. This is really what moksha is. And that's why I asked you at the beginning, what really brought us here? What is the underlying motivation that brought us here? And I think we can all say, ultimately, it is this desire for freedom, this desire for wholeness, all the things we said, all of which, by the way, don't matter. They're just words. But the direct experience is what we're really wanting. And that's why the science of yoga is so valuable for us. That's why it gives us so many tools that point to this experience of moksha. So in any moment of our lives, to begin to just pause and see, especially when we're not feeling really good, something feels off, we feel a little out of alignment, we can stop and pause and inquire, what is this feeling? We're going to talk about this process in a minute, because it's a very useful, simple process of self-inquiry that we can use. And I find myself using it more and more because it really works. It works in that, it helps us to inquire into to that which is not really who we are, so that it can begin to dissolve. So the inquiries around moksha, of course, who am I? Or what am I? May even be a better inquiry. What am I? Who am I implies there's actually a who there. I wonder about this. It seems to me that if we really start to inquire into our experience, we see that there is the experience and the context of experience. The who implies there's a separate someone there. So we want to even inquire about that. Is there a who here, or is it just experience and the context of our experience? That which is experiencing. That. What is that it's experiencing? We don't know. We don't know until we start to inquire into it. Would you agree? freedom from choices that make me unhappy. How can I free myself from some of those compulsive choices that are leading to, illusion and separation? Non-attachment, vairagya. Vairagya is symbolized by a sword, cutting through our attachments. So seeing how we're attached and to what. What do we hold on to for that sense of security in any moment? Another reason why retreat can be such a powerful experience, because we start to realize as we let go of some of our attachments bit by bit, and we have the context of a retreat, a container. We refer to this retreat space as a container where we can sort of just let go of a lot of those attachments. And as we see them, we can begin to, or they begin to fall away. I shouldn't say, because we don't really do anything. It's just in the seeing of them that they begin to fall away. They're just not real. Let's hold the questions, if you don't mind. Yeah, because there'll be opportunity for that.
Okay, so the real definition in Chopra is non-attachment?
Yeah, if we're looking for a hard and fast definition, yes. Om Namah Shivaya, the great mantra, Om Namah Shivaya. I bow to Shiva, absolute consciousness. Not my will, but the divine will be done. This is real freedom, where we can give up, that fear that often keeps us in this illusion of separation. Because sooner or later we have to give it all up, right?
Yes.
Even if it's not at the moment of death. Oh my God. I have to let go. I'm letting go. And why not learn to do this before that time and realize that this is really is more of the enlightened state. That's the great transformation when we come to that place of, first of all, where I can't do this alone. I need help. And in that moment, if we're available to the grace that is always available to us, we have the confidence to let go, to say, help. Open ourselves to that something bigger. Surrendering our will, our self-will, to what is the divine will. And oftentimes when that happens, through sometimes the dark night of the soul, sometimes through experiences on retreat, where we kind of come up against ourselves and we feel like, I'm stuck or something like that, and we ask for help. Those are such important moments, because in those moments, that's where real transformation occurs. And we realize that we're part of the one. We are, in fact, the one. So the inquiry, of course, is who or what am I really? Around moksha. So Deepak has given us so many wonderful tools, over the years. And I often, sometimes I'm really moved when I listen to him speak all these years later. I've been listening to him talk for 26 years, And a lot of times the stuff he's been saying all along, I'm just sort of now, I'm sure we've all had that experience, It's like, that's what it is. So, we're grateful for our teachers. And it's important that we always remember our teachers. And we all have many teachers, but it's important that we acknowledge them with gratitude too, because we are, part of that stream of, the great tradition, the great sampradaya, you could say. That's why, in the mantra that Danielle and I did last night, we all did together, the Gayatri, we were saying, this mantra has been done for thousands and thousands of years by millions and millions and millions of people with great intention, for enlightenment, for illumination. So when we chant these great mantras, we're aligning ourselves with all of the people that have had the same, that have shared the intention, and we're empowered and supported by those intentions and by those great souls. So it's so important to pay attention to these precepts, these great teachings, because they align us with such a great movement toward awakening. So we want to talk about some practical applications of self-inquiry. In that everything, anything, in any moment that we experience can be a pathway back to our source, back to what is. Because it's the source, after all. So everything that's manifested has come from that source. And in fact, we are that. Even in the midst of all of our various types of identification, if we begin to inquire sincerely into what is this? What am I? We begin to sort of loosen some of that sleep. Because we're already awake, but our attention has become localized, so localized that we've forgotten who we are. I mean, I'm not speaking of any one particular person, of course, but this is the sort of the tendency for human beings. So that's why inquiry is so important. We can listen to great teachers and that will tell us the truth. Like I was saying, someone like Deepak I've been listening to for years. I didn't quite get it until at some point, maybe a light went on. I was like, oh, yeah. So, we already have the truth. We are the truth. We don't need somebody else to give it to us. If somebody could give it to us, they could take it away. And we don't want that. So we have to really find that truth within ourselves, which is, we can say with confidence that it is there. It is truly there. And sometimes, it's these moments of challenge. And in a way, retreat provides some of those moments of challenge because as I said before, we're taking away a lot of the distractions. So we really have to face ourselves. We have to look at ourselves. Some of these deeper emotions that we've been kind of keeping, don't want to deal with it. It's really important that we look into those and that we find ways to heal as we do. So one approach, and in fact this is one that we incorporated last year and several years during our retreat here, but it's certainly one that we can utilize every day in our own lives, is just in any moment to sense the body-mind from that in which everything arises. So to have that intention, Everything arises in, we could say, consciousness, absolute, doesn't matter what we call it, but to inquire what is that something in which the body-mind and the sense of body-mind arises. Just that simple intention. Next, stop. Just stop wherever we happen to be. Deepak talked about this as, Renee, it's, what is it? Sense the body? S? No.
S stands for stop.
S stands just for stop, right. So stop, take a breath, observe, and then, kind of proceed in some way or other. Not necessarily in the way of doing, but proceed to this next step, which is, first of all, to ask the question, am I aware? We could ask that question right now. Are we aware? Am I aware? We could each ask that of ourselves. Am I aware right now? What am I aware of? Well, there can be an infinite number of things we can be aware of, but what, for us in this moment, am I aware of? And what is the sense of that? Again, not that we're grasping onto something, we're just sort of seeing what arises. What arises in that from which everything arises? What am I aware of? And then who or what is aware? So this simple shift of attention can be very helpful, very effective in, extracting ourselves from sleep and just to become observant of what is. Not necessarily having to give it a label. The labeling part is what the mind wants to do. It wants to, lock it down, wants to, put it in a box. So part of this process is sort of letting go even of the labels, even of the need to categorize things, but to inquire deeply, what is this? What is it I'm aware of? And then the natural next step is to inquire, well, what is aware? What is this awareness? And just to allow ourselves to be easily with that inquiry. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to achieve anything. There's no goal. But it's the process itself that allows for the relaxation of identification. And it allows for often more spaciousness, some opening, some ease, some quietness, stillness, sense of peace. Again, we're not looking for this. We're not trying to achieve anything. But just by following the procedure, following the simple practice, we start to see some of these things unfold. This is a three-step process that I use myself a lot, that I found to be tremendously helpful. And I really would like to encourage you all to experiment with it and find out for yourselves if it works. It's especially effective, when we're, as I was saying before, when we're feeling out of sorts, we're not feeling good, or we're feeling anxiety or fear or something that, where we feel kind of stuck in a difficult emotion. So the first step is to ask the question, what is the feeling? Especially if it's not a good feeling. What is it? Is it at this stage we can give it a name. Is it fear? Is it sadness? Is it depression, anger, jealousy? What is the nature of the feeling? The next step is to ask the question, where in my body do I feel it? This is very helpful in just localizing our attention to in the present moment, to what is this, to become very present with the feeling, really zero in on it, I guess you could say. Do we feel it in the gut or the heart or the throat? Where is it? Where is it? Maybe it's not anywhere in particular, but we want to try to get present with the feeling itself. And I think this is the most important part, to ask the question, how old do I feel when I inquire into this feeling? This is where we really begin to go a little bit deeper into ourselves, usually into a memory from our early lives where we may not have had the tools to resolve the experience or the emotion. And oftentimes when that happens, we're stuck with a particular feeling. And we just, especially when we're little kids, we didn't have the tools, we didn't have the life experience to know how to deal with certain situations or certain emotions. And we got stuck. We adopted a conclusion which became kind of fixed in our subtle body, in our psyche. A conclusion about ourselves, usually something to the effect of, I'm not safe, or I'm not good enough. That's one many of us can relate to. People abandon me, or I'm not strong enough to take care of myself, or I can't trust others, I can't trust in the environment, I can't trust life, or I'm bad, As little children, sometimes that can be a stuck conclusion, or I'm not lovable. Anybody think of any other ones that might fit this category? I'm alone. Yeah, that can certainly be one of them. Yeah. I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. Yeah. Yes. I'm not smart enough. Yeah. Yeah. So there are many of these kinds of conclusions that we can draw, especially as little kids. And in doing so, I think of it as like being a scab over a wound. You know, it's like we develop this conclusion with our minds so that we don't have to necessarily feel this anymore. And so we push it away, a wound. And we've all had wounding. We've all had trauma in our lives. Some trauma's pretty serious trauma. But whatever the trauma that wasn't resolved in childhood, anytime that button gets pushed in our lives in the present, we may feel some of that, anxiety or fight, flight, or some of the symptoms of that trauma. Even though we consciously may not realize what it is, we just know we don't want to feel it. So we get up our defenses and we do something to distract ourselves or deflect the attention or drink a gallon of whatever, something to numb it so we don't have to deal with it. Well, this is precisely the moment where we want to inquire into this, first of all, the feeling, where the feeling is in the body, and how old do I feel? Because when we start to inquire into how old do I feel, a lot of times we get these glimpses of moments in our past. And we see that little version of ourselves who really was stuck and didn't know what to do. And from our place now, as adults, we can have compassion for that younger version of ourselves. We can begin to hold that child and say, you did the best you could. You didn't know. It's not true that you weren't safe. It's not true that you're not good enough. I mean, it's not still true is what I mean. They may not have felt safe or good enough or abandoned or whatever at the time, but it's not true now. What happened, but it's not happening now. So in a way, we're sort of attempting to integrate those disconnected aspects of ourselves. And for many of us, probably most of us at some times, there's this little 5-year-old child in there that's pulling the strings, when something happens in life. So in the shamanic tradition, they call it soul retrieval, where we go back and we sort of retrieve aspects of our soul that have been disconnected. And it's certainly the basis of psychotherapy. And yet we don't necessarily need to have a therapist. Therapists often help us they kind of hold up a mirror, they hold space for us so that we can feel safe enough to go into some of these memories. But I assure you, for most of us, we can do this ourselves. Just by this simple 3-step inquiry. What am I feeling? Where in my body do I feel it? How old do I feel when I inquire into it? Sometimes the memories are painful, but yet it's going into that experience that helps us to open it up, resolve it. We get to see where we were stuck, and we can have compassion for ourselves. And in this way, we become whole. We can become whole. So another reason why retreat is so valuable, because we do have a lot of opportunity during retreat to come up against some of those uncomfortable feelings. I'm alone, Nobody's talking to me. I feel cut off from the things I'm accustomed to, holding on to, my blankies, whatever the comfort is, and to ask the question, okay, what is that feeling? Where do I feel it, and how old do I feel? And a lot of times we will connect almost immediately with an earlier version of ourselves. And the truth is, as we begin to do this process of inquiry, we find, as we come to compassion for ourselves, that when we get triggered by something in our present life, we don't have the same response, the same reaction. We don't immediately go into fight, flight. It's like, oh, it's happening, but it's not the great wound that we've been protecting all these years. So, very important process, this process of inquiry. Another form of inquiry, again, that I feel is something we can do in any moment of our lives. Because as I said earlier, as human living organisms, we're always seeking nourishment in some form. And we're trying to avoid what is not nourishing. So in any moment of decision, and we're constantly making choices in our lives, in any moment of decision, we can ask the question, it says, our suffering usually has to do with either over-attachment to some remembered past or some anticipated, imagined future, neither of which is real. I mean, this is important to say. In the same way that we can't breathe in the past, we can't breathe in the future, right? So there's no nourishment in the past, there's no nourishment in the future. So to begin to inquire, as we inquire, and it is helpful, to see where we're stuck, but ultimately we want to be able to let go of the past and to some degree let go of some imagined future. It doesn't mean that we don't have desires or goals or intentions in life. As I said, we wouldn't get out of bed in the morning if we didn't have desires. But as Deepak points out so beautifully, part of the mechanics of manifestation of our desires is to relinquish our attachment to how they become fulfilled. So this is a big part of the art of living, I would say, is to feel our desires, feel the emotions associated with the desires. No, it's important that we pay attention to our desires because a lot of times they're not really our personal desires. They're the desires of nature that are expressing through us. So if we can kind of relax our micromanagement, our manipulation, and allow nature to do so, it will fulfill its own desires. This is real, what we call magic when this happens in life, when things just suddenly become manifest in our lives. So we don't eliminate desire, but at the same time we trust in the universe, as Deepak says, handling the details. We trust. So we don't need to be too urgently preoccupied with the future. We can get very caught up in the software of the soul, the experience that we have, which we have an experience of something being positive and enjoyable and nourishing in some way, out of which arises the desire either to repeat the experience if it was enjoyable or avoid repeating it if it wasn't enjoyable. So the desire factor, and then, or I should say the memory of that experience as being pleasurable or painful, and out of the memory arises the desire either to repeat the experience or avoid repeating the experience. So no nourishment in the past, no nourishment in the future. Nourishment can only be found in the present. So this idea about nourishment, I think, is fundamental to us as living organisms. It's not all that we are, as we saw in our holistic self-inquiry. We ultimately want to remember our true nature that's beyond nourishment or toxicity, it's beyond experience. But in any moment of questioning or any moment of a decision to be made, we can ask the question, is this a nourishing choice for me? And we have to, we're not going to get the answer from anybody outside of us. If we keep giving our power away to someone else to tell us what's nourishing for us, we're never going to really develop a reliable internal guidance system. We're never going to cultivate our intuition. So if we ask the question, is this nourishing? Is it a nourishing choice? And we check in with our gut, our intuition. Is it nourishing? And we'll know. We will absolutely know if it's nourishing. Or if it's not. Yuck. No, it's not. I can feel it. Or is it somewhere in between? And that's an important part of that inquiry also. So I wanted to give us an opportunity to do a little inquiry together this morning. And if you all can just begin to hand out these cards. We're going to do a little reflective self-inquiry in a dyad. So we've got some time to do this, and I want to kind of try to do it in a way that we keep our voices down, okay? Because we're going to be doing a dyad where one person of the dyad of the two will ask the other a question, and then the other person will have the opportunity to really reflect to inquire into what is true for them, and just begin to share in a sincere way what they feel is true. And continue to do so until you're finished. And then the first person, the person that asked the question, will just say thank you. That's it. And then that same person will go on to the next question, which you'll see in a minute when you get your card. And then the person will respond in the same way and continue to do so until they're finished. And then the first person will say thank you. And then I'll let us know. I'll give a point. At some point, we're going to switch to, so the other person, the person that was responding, will be the questioner. So I would ask you to just kind of keep your voices down. You know, remember we're in this retreat environment, and so we want to kind of keep our attention. We want to be self-referral in this process. So I'd like you to have a partner. Ideally, someone you're sitting next to is fine. If you know the person, fine. If you don't, that's okay. It doesn't matter. But I know the seats are not so easy to turn in, but if you can. So here's, sorry?
Do we go through all 3 questions?
Yes, you'll go through. So I'll repeat the instructions. So we're going to go through each of the 3 questions, and we'll be doing this for about 10 minutes. So you'll get through the 3rd question. The other person will respond, and you'll say thank you, and then you go back to the first question again. There's no rush. There's nothing to accomplish. There's no right answer to any of these questions. There's just the opportunity to inquire a little bit and see what resonates, see what you feel is true. So everybody got a partner? Yeah? Everybody comfortable in your partnering? You know what? If you're having to do that, maybe you could just come out of your seats and sit on the floor if you don't mind doing that. Just find a place that's comfortable, okay? Don't strain your necks or backs or butts or anything else. Okay, so we're going to just start all together, and I'll ring the chime after 10 minutes of inquiring. So again, everybody clear on the instructions? So one person that's got the longest hair, we'll say, will be the first questioner.